All right, so like I did say, this is Jonathan. We are here with the first time I've ever done this coaching session. We are going to be going over a $1,000 buy-in tournament that I ended up doing well in a while back. We'll have everyone's chat and whatnot up, so I can definitely see that you guys can hear me. So that is excellent. We are here with the biggest, my biggest online win coaching session. So what we're going to do here today is we are going to call on people throughout the day for maybe 20 minutes or so, and we're going to be able to discuss things as we go through them. So if anyone wants to be first, we'll go ahead and get started. If you guys can see my screen, also let me know that. And if you have any questions at all throughout the day, feel free to type them in if you're not currently being called on. So we will go ahead and get started. So who wants to go first? Say who wants to go first, and we will get to it. So let's get Rob on the line. Hello, Rob.
Hello, Jonathan.
Hi, how are you?
Slightly hungover, but other than that, great.
Well, awesome. So it's good to be up this early in the morning, hungover.
That's all right. It was all very good wine last night, so.
Excellent. Um, Mary is saying that they're not too sure how to talk to me on the phone. If you have a microphone, you can make sure the microphone's plugged in. And if not, I believe you can call in to the number that's somehow listed here and type in the PIN number, and you'll be able to talk whenever it gets to you. Dan, if you're here, please give us some info on that. All right, so this is it's $1,000 buy-in tournament, like I said, and this is a multi-entry tournament. So I bought into this thing 4 times. I guess to set you guys up in this tournament, I actually showed up and, well, we're on hand 136 for some reason. I believe I bought in a little bit late because I was playing a $10,000 tournament. I had just busted. I had just bubbled this $10,000 tournament in California. So I may be a little bit tilted. So if you see something crazy initially, that's probably why. But here we go. I guess, Rob, you play a lot of online tournaments to some extent?
No, I don't play any online tournaments. In fact, one of the questions I was going to ask is I understand people are back to doing that now, and I'd love to know what sites they like and where the better sort of experiences are right now.
Yeah, there really aren't that many places for Americans to play currently. I know a lot of people get set up out of the country, but obviously if you're not playing full-time, that's kind of silly. I mean, I'm not even set up to play out of the country, and I play a lot. So Americans are playing mostly on sites like Lock Poker or Bovada and places like that. And, they have some games, but I'm honestly not too sure I would trust them with that much of my money. So I would be a little bit careful with that. However, it looks like there is a decent amount of legislation moving forward now, particularly in New Jersey. Apparently, PokerStars is about to be set up to at least let people in New Jersey play. And if that's the case, then that would be pretty good. At least it's a step forward, so we'll see.
Maybe I'll move to New Jersey.
Yeah.
Anyway.
All right, so at this table, looking around the table, as you guys see, we have a bunch of statistics up on the players. The first number in the top left-hand corner, that is their voluntary put dollars in the pot. That basically says how many hands they're playing. My numbers down here, I have the 7-6 suited. This is me on full tilt. My numbers are not really going to be accurate for me because probably a lot of this is short-handed play, but everyone else's numbers are going to be pretty standard. And you see most people are going to be playing a pretty tight game. They're only playing about 10% of hands for the most part. And that's probably going to be okay, especially in a tough tournament. And this is definitely a difficult field. Looking around the table, Bluff Ferrent is actually one of my very good friends. Shannon Shore, he's at this table. We have Mr. Tim Com, he's a regular. And I know Fatal Error is also a regular that plays quite often. So this is definitely a tough tournament. And in tough tournaments, I generally play a little bit tighter than I normally would, because there's really no point in getting too out of line. You're not going to get a lot of value by playing around and whatnot. All right, so here we are, 7-6 suited. What do you like with 7-6 suited on the first hand of the tournament?
I like a raise.
Yeah, I think raising is good. I also think, believe it or not, that folding is acceptable in this spot if you think the players are tight. Because, I'm sorry, if you think the players are going to be aggressive. Because we are pretty deep stacked here. You see we have 250 big blinds, so I'm pretty much always going to play the hand, but I think raising is certainly fine. If we see these players to our left are going to be constantly playing back at us, though, there's nothing wrong with folding.
Yeah, I was just going to say it seems like a good chance to inexpensively find out how aggressively they're going to play back at you.
Exactly. Alan asks, how long are the blind levels? I honestly don't know, but on full tilt, what they did is the blinds move up very slowly in terms of actual progressing, whereas on sites like PokerStars, they tend to move up like they maybe double or go up 50% each time, but on full tilt, they go a little bit slower. So maybe you'll go to like 300, 600, then to 350, 700, and then 400, 800. So the blinds actually go up every like 10 or 15 minutes, but the levels that actually they don't actually progress that much in that 15 minutes. All right, King Seven on the hijack. What do you guys like here? Also, everyone that's in the chat box,
Uh,
definitely type in your responses. Get involved because if you're involved in this, it's going to be much more beneficial than if you're just watching. So definitely get involved here. So what do you like here with King Seven, Rob?
I'm not a huge fan of hands like that with a face card and a kind of medium or low, unless you're going to use them to three bet for some reason. I would kind of fold that thing.
Yeah, I think
Not
fold.
enough chips.
Yeah, I think folding's fine. There's really no reason to play hands like this. Um, if the blinds get a little bit bigger and you think that you can steal them a lot of the time, it's fine. But this is not really a hand you want to play. So I think folding's definitely going to be standard. So we fold there. Pocket threes. Now here's something a little bit different. What do you think about this?
I would say let's play him. Let's raise and see if maybe you get played back at a little bit, and with the right kind of flop, you could actually store some decent chips.
Definitely. Okay, so we raised to 60, and the Sadie character 3 bets. And, if we look at this Sadie's stats, this person's actually pretty aggressive compared to most everyone else at the table. But we actually do not really know that yet in this tournament because these numbers are after we played the 100 hands with him.
Okay.
So, we don't really know much about this guy. So what do you think right here with the pocket threes?
I would say unless you see evidence of the contrary, and you don't know this guy, right? You don't know these numbers or anything.
No, I don't really know anything about the
Um,
guy.
yeah, I'd probably fold. You're behind or at best slightly even, slightly better than even to just about everything, and you don't know how this guy plays or what hands. So
Yeah, I think that we're definitely behind currently, and behind his range for sure. But I think right here we can put in 100 chips to try to flop a set, and if we miss our set, we can easily get out of the way.
okay,
Because
all right.
if you're getting something like 10 to 1 or better on your money on implied odds, you should probably go ahead and take the flop. And right here we're putting in 100 to try to win 5,000, so we're getting 50 to 1. So
Yeah, okay.
I'm definitely going to call and try to get a flop here. I mean, the 100 you have to realize the 100 chips we're putting in here is fairly insignificant, right?
Yeah, sorry, it's still early. All right. Anyway,
Okay, so we miss our set, we check, he bets, and as advertised, I will be folding here because we missed our set. And even though this is a pretty good board for me to attack, because this board should be hitting my range pretty hard, I'm not really looking to get too out of line early in the tournament. I mean, if I'm confident this guy's only 3 betting with stuff like big pairs and big cards, I'm probably going to be check raising this flop a lot of the time because this can't be good for him. And there's so many good turn cards that I can continue barreling. Like any club's going to be good. Any 9, 10, jack, set 6, 5, all those cards are going to be pretty good to attack. So that's something I'm going to be at least considering. But for now, since I don't really know anything about this guy, I'm not going to get too out of line.
okay.
So Alan asked, would I check raise this flop as a bluff later in the tournament? I don't really think the stage of the tournament has much to do with it, more so than just having a good read on your opponent. If you know your opponent's only 3 betting with the high card type range, this is a great board to check raise on because I could easily have a set and I could easily have a pretty good draw. But I'm not too sure this guy is only 3 betting me with those high card hands. This guy could easily be 3 betting me with stuff like 10-9 suited, 9-8 suited, and whatnot. In which case he's never going to fold. So I think it's more so of just having a good read on your opponent, more so than the stage of the tournament really mattering that much. Brian also asked, what's the name of the software we're using? This is Hold'em Manager 2. They have Hold'em Manager 3 out at this point, and I think it's probably pretty good. Oh wait, no, you know what? I take that back. Hold'em Manager 2 is the new one. Hold'em Manager 1 was out for a while, and this is Hold'em Manager 2. I just upgraded to this, and it's a pretty good program. And Dan asks also, would I fold to a 3-bet with Ace Jack or so pre-flop. Oh wait, if I were him, I'm not too sure what you're asking. I guess you're saying on the flop. Say on the flop. Say we check raise him. What should this guy be continuing with? So what do you think? What do you think here, Rob? If I check raise here, what hands should this Sadie character be continuing with?
Well, if you're check raising him and I'm him, I'm looking at that. I'm thinking, okay, you could have a flush draw or a strong draw that you're just looking to get some chips in the middle with. So I'd be continuing with all over pairs. Certainly any sets I might have stumbled upon here on the flop. If I have a nut flush draw, definitely I'm keep going.
Yeah.
I don't know, that sort of comes to mind.
Yeah, I think what ends up happening here is that if we check raise, it's kind of tough for this guy to continue unless he thinks that we are bluffing a ton. So, say I check raise and this guy's sitting here like, say he has ace king with one club. It's going to be kind of tough for him to continue. I mean, he's probably going to end up calling a check raise with ace king with a club this deep, but that's probably going to be the worst hand he's going to call with. If he has something like, say he randomly has 9-7, he's probably going to call the check raise and then fold if I continue applying aggression if he misses. So basically, I think if I check raise, he has to continue with something like a pair or better or a good draw. But I do think it's definitely possible this guy has a good draw here. So
And wouldn't it depend on his read of you? If you're you live, for example, if this were live, he could look at you and see. If you're an ROG, a retired old guy, that would mean one thing. If you're a young guy, with the hoodie on and all that, then that's different. So
yeah, that's definitely true. I mean, if a young aggressive kid check raises here, I mean, honestly, I'm not even sure it matters that much who is check raising here. Because if a young kid is check raising, his range is going to be stuff like two pair and draws, two pair and better and draws, and that's a pretty tough range to continue against. And an older tight guy may be check raising with stuff like sets and top pairish type hands, and even then, that's a pretty tough range to go against. So, I think either way, Sadie has to have something pretty decent to continue.
yeah, that's true.
Alan asks, would I check raise here with 10-9? Yeah, my general strategy here is to check raise with pretty much all draws, and sets I'm probably going to check raise as well. Two pair I'm going to check raise. Stuff like one pair hands, I'm probably going to check call and see what ends up happening. Obviously, we have a one pair hand with pocket threes, but it's not really that good, obviously. John asks, if I was in Sadie's position, what is my 3-betting range on the button? Well, that is a very in-depth question. It definitely depends. If we pull up Poker Stove here and discuss a range to 3-bet, you definitely want to 3-bet all of your best hands. So I'm going to be 3-betting stuff like this for value. This is going to be sort of the value 3-betting range. Then I'm going to probably have some random hands in there that aren't really quite good enough to call with. So stuff like King 5 suited, King 6 suited, maybe some of the weaker suited connectors. I guess we'll probably see more of this as we progress through the tournament, where I get to 3-bet a little bit. And I guess it's worth mentioning that my strategy has changed a tiny bit over the years, to where I'm 3-betting against some players with hands purely for value because I know they call a lot. And against guys that don't really call very often, I'm going to be 3-betting more of these bluffy hands because they're not really playable. So this would be a polarized range where I'm 3-betting the good hands and some of the weaker hands. But then you could also 3-bet something like this against some of the weaker players who don't really 4-bet that often. And you can 3-bet stuff like this for value against them. So it depends on your opponent, but I'm going to be 3-betting at least some sort of a range. Probably nothing crazy, though. Let's see. Say we check raise with 10-9 of clubs, so we have a straight flush draw, and he shoves. So say I make it 600, he goes all in. Am I calling off with the 10-9 of clubs? Definitely. I think if you get a hand that premium in this situation, you can't really get away from it. And if you do like to play it aggressively, that's fine. Say we do have 10-9 of clubs here, and I think whenever you start getting to like super premium draws, there becomes a little bit more value in check calling, because I don't really want to get shoved on. Like if I have 10-9 of hearts and I get if I have check raise and he shoves, that's okay, I can fold because my hand probably doesn't have that much equity anyways at that point. And if I have something like 10-9 of clubs, I may check call, and then on the turn check. If he bets again, I'm going to check shove at that point because that's going to give me a lot of fold equity. And if I If I hit, I'll probably be more prone to check call and slow play it a bit. Dan says he wouldn't want to play 10-9 of clubs aggressively in case he may have the nut flush draw. I think if he has the nut flush draw, that's just kind of unlucky. And even if he does have the nut flush draw, we have straight outs and pair outs, so it's not like we're ever drawing dead. So no, 10-9 of clubs is a very good hand here, and you don't really need to be concerned with running into a better hand. Let's see. Andre says, can I call the shove with a flush draw and overcards because it's a multi-entry tournament? I don't really think it being a multi-entry tournament has anything to do with it. I'm not really trying to go broke, but at the same time, it's a poker tournament. You have to get some chips, and whenever they give you a strong hand, you kind of have to go with it. All right, a few people are asking where they should be typing their questions. You can type it in the chat box or question box. I believe that all comes up to the same thing for me. I don't think you guys can actually see all the questions that are being asked for some reason. But, yeah. The top right of the screen is where you should be typing everything. But I'm going to read off all the questions that are asked. What is that, Rob?
I'm sorry. I don't see anybody else's questions, but if anybody's looking around for it, it did take me a second, but it's called the GoToWebinar Control Panel. It's a little window that's sort of hidden behind stuff.
Okay, so yeah, if you guys can find the GoToWebinar Control Panel, that would be, I guess, where it is. If you guys are typing stuff in right now, I'm getting all of your questions. If you're typing something and typing enter, I can see it. Like Brian, I can see it. Two Brians, I can see it. And a few other people already to type stuff. I already deleted it because, yes, I can see everything you guys are typing. Don't worry about that. If you don't see the small window, there's a small arrow you can click on to expand it. So look for that kind of thing. I try to use this program. It seems to be the best by far. And if you guys hate it, let me know. If you love it, let me know. We're going to have to go ahead and move on to another hand soon, though, because we've already spent 15 minutes on this hand, and we may be here all day if we spend 15 minutes on each hand. Let's see. Would I check shove 10-9 clubs on the turn if I decide to check call the turn? If I check call the flop, and I definitely could check. If I check call the flop, I would definitely consider check shoving the turn, because that's going to give me a lot of fold equity. So say I check call the flop, there's going to be something like 800 chips in the pot. On the turn, if I check and he bets 600, at that point I'm not really looking to call because we're going to be out of position. It's going to be tough to get money if I get paid. And because of that, I need to start figuring out how to get fold equity. And if there's already 800 in the pot plus another 600 bet or so, I want to go ahead and pile the money in. So even though it is relatively high risk, I think it's definitely going to be the right play. Richard says, by check calling with one pair of hands and check raising the other hands, do I sort of tell my opponent what I have? I do to some extent, but notice I'm going to have some premium draws in my check calling range. I'm going to have some draws in my check raising range. So there's always going to be some amount of bluffs in there. But yeah, you're kind of telling your opponent where you stand if they actually know your strategy, but a lot of players don't. A lot of players are going to assume you're check raising with all sorts of stuff and check calling with all sorts of stuff. So no, even though I think that's sort of generally good poker is check calling with stuff like a pair, and check raising with value hand, like extreme value hands and draws. That's going to generally be the right play. Brian asks, what percent of Sunday Million people are using stuff like Hold'em Manager? You say you assume in the bigger buy-ins it must be a high percentage. He says, is it like 5% of people are using it in Sunday Million? No, I would say it's actually probably a lot more than 5% of people are using stuff like Hold'em Manager in the Sunday Million and the bigger tournaments. I'm not going to say it's mandatory to use these programs, but it's definitely a good thing to do, especially if you're going to be playing a lot of tables, because you need to be able to get numbers on your opponents. And if you have no information on your opponents, you're probably going to end up falling behind, especially as you get deeper and deeper into the tournament. We're asked, why would 10-9 of clubs we want to check raise the turn instead of check raising the flop? Because if we check raise the flop and get shoved on, we're not really thrilled to get it in, because we are going to be up against a bigger draw sometimes, and also our hand doesn't really have value in calling off. I mean, we're going to be pretty close to break even, and that's not really what we want. We want to be check raising with the draws, and if we check raise with the bad draws and they shove, we can easily fold. But if we check raise with the premium draws and they shove, we're not like happy to call off there. Okay, let's see. My opponents certainly don't have very much information on me. And one last question. If I decide to check raise with 10-9 with no flush draw on the flop and I get re-raised, what would I do? I would fold. So if I make it 600 here, they re-raise, I would definitely fold with stuff like 10-9 offsuit. All right, so that was a long hand. I'm going to skip through these that are obvious folds. 10-4 or King-4, 6-2 offsuit. We get a walk with King-Jack. All right, here's a hand. Ace-10 offsuit in the small blind. What do you like here, Rob?
Raise. Sorry, raise to probably 60 in this case. Yeah.
Okay, so I raise to 60 and this guy calls. What are you thinking here? This is always a tricky spot where we have, something decent, but we are out of position.
Yeah. Well, he could have called with a whole wide range of stuff. I would say continue. You got two overcards, a backdoor flush draw. I would make a C bet here.
Okay. Yeah, I think betting is good, but the problem with betting, especially when this deep stacked, is that our opponent, if he's smart, is going to call or raise a ton of the time. Because this is not really good for my range, but it is kind of good for his range. And that's going to make it really difficult on me to continue. However, if I check and he bets, I don't really want to check call either. So we're sort of stuck into two bad spots. Toby asked, could I ever check raise? I guess I could, but I wouldn't really be a fan of that because he's only going to continue when I'm crushed in that situation. I guess it would look very strong, and that's fine, but I think right here my hand is probably best, so I don't really want to be looking to turn it to a bluff too often. Yeah, I don't know. Check raise is kind of cool. So I continuation bet 80, he calls, and this is where it starts to get kind of ugly. So what do you think about right here when we get the king on the turn?
Well, your equity is sort of plummeted here. He may be just bluffing, but I don't know. A king hits your perceived range a little better.
Yeah, this is where you have to start playing a bit of poker. You know what I mean? It seems like everyone in the chat box is having conflicting answers as well. Some people are saying check, some are saying bet, and I think what it boils down to is if you think this guy is going to be floating a lot on the flop, I should probably bet again just to pick up the pot. But if I think the guy's going to float the flop and then raise me, if I bet, then I guess I should be looking to check fold. And this is sort of the power of being in position, is that you can apply a ton of pressure. If we check here, I think I need to check fold. I'm not looking to check call in this situation because we are out of position with ace high and we're probably going to be facing a river bet. This is one of these spots where a lot of players call because they think we are ahead currently. But even if you're ahead, it doesn't really matter if your opponent's going to bet the river and we're not going to be able to call the river. So what we're doing here is we'd be check calling and we'd be check calling and then end up check folding the river, and that's not really a good strategy because our opponent's probably going to bet a lot of the hands that are worse than us on the river, which is going to make us fold the best hand, or they're going to bet for value, which is also going to make us fold. We're folding the worst hand then, but we were beat already. So not really much good can come from check calling here, I don't think. But if we do check raise, then I mean, I don't know. I think right here, really, the only place to check fold. We could also bet as a bluff to try to get my opponent off some random draws and random floats. But in general, I'm probably going to be check folding here. A lot of people are agreeing that it's probably best to just get out of the way here.
Yeah, I'm starting to lose interest in this, continuing in this hand. So.
Yeah, this is not a great hand. Brian says, does the 14 figure give you help here? I don't really know what that's referring to. Oh, you're saying his pre-flop raising calling percentage? Yeah, he's generally going to be tight, and yeah, that's relevant. But I mean, we are out of position, blind versus blind, so this guy's range should be pretty wide. I mean, most people in the big blind when the small blind raises, they're going to call very frequently. And then Dan asked if I was in this guy's shoes and I had a pair of fives, so I'd be looking to call down, and yeah, probably. I'm not folding a five here. If I had like ace five and called pre-flop and comes this, if my opponent bets, I'm calling. If he bets again on this king, I'm definitely calling. If he bets again on the river, I'm probably calling. See, is there any way to increase the size of the poker table on my end? Yes, there actually is, and I will increase the size of the poker table for the next video. I apologize that I did not know. All right, so anyways, I like to go ahead and bet again, and like I said, I don't really have a problem with the bet, but I think I'm probably going to check fold in today's game. This is a tough one. I could go either way, and like you guys all in the chat box said, we could definitely go either way on this one. When I bet here, I'm obviously bluffing. I'm trying to get him off of some random stuff, but if he has a five, like I said, I don't think the guy's really folding. There's also a zoom on your end. There's a zoom button on the top left-hand corner, so check out that zoom button if you can't see the screen currently. All right, so I bet 180. He calls. So now we get a pretty fun card. What do you like here, Rob?
Well, I think I would check and let the guy bluff at me and call it.
Yeah, I definitely like check call. Let's see. That's what you guys are all generally agreeing. Richard asks, why bet your opponent off a float whenever you beat all the floats on the turn? And the reason I'm betting is because we can't really properly check call the turn because we're not in great shape, and then we can't check call the. If I do check call the turn, I certainly can't check call the river if I miss. So by checking, I think we're generally giving up on the hand, and that's not really what we want to do. Tom says, is check calling, hoping for a Broadway turn card to bluff, better than the bet line, especially early in the tournament? I'm very rarely check calling the turn here and then leading the river as a bluff. I think that's generally going to be a pretty fishy line that gets looked up very frequently. So no, that's generally not going to be my plan. So all right, so I definitely like the check line on the river. I think we could consider betting because it certainly does look a little bit bluffy. We could be betting for value, but I probably would prefer a check as well. So I check. Guy checks behind, and we beat pocket sevens. So he was probably going to be in call down mode throughout the entire hand, and unfortunately we kind of got owned in that hand because he put in money every time when he was ahead and didn't put money when he was behind. So good play by him. I would not hate a bet on this river if I think this guy's going to look me up with stuff like pocket sevens or 6-5 and whatnot. But, I'm okay with this. I don't really have a problem with it. Some people say we should be betting on this river because it's difficult for us to actually have anything. And yeah, I think that's okay. That's certainly reasonable. Brian says that we're beaten by a 3, a flush, a better ace. So I would be check folding. And you can't really be concerned with all of the hands that we are beat by because those aren't really a big percentage of our opponent's range. A flush is almost impossible for him to have because it's a backdoor flush. When the backdoor flush comes in, you certainly don't need to be concerned with that. When the front door flush comes in, like say the river was the ace of spades, we could be a little bit concerned, but probably not. I'm still check calling there. Whenever you have top pair, blind versus blind, you have to be pretty happy. Alan asks, if I was him, pre-flop, would I have 3 bets? And probably not. I think if you 3-bet and then get 4-bet, you're not really happy. I think you're a whole lot better off calling pre-flop and then just kind of getting to showdown against someone that's probably going to be a little bit too aggressive. So I actually like the way he played the hand on every street. I definitely would call if he bet the river. If I check and he bets, I'm calling every time. If I check and he bets 1.5 times pot, is he ever behind your ace-10? If he bet huge on this river, I mean, I don't know. I'd be pretty unhappy. And if I did lead the river and he raised, I would have to fold. So if I do bet this river and get raised, I'm definitely folding every time. And for that reason, I definitely like the check a little bit more than I like the lead. All right, 10-3 suited here. What do you like with that, Rob? You still with us?
Yeah, I'm right here. I hate that hand. I would fold it.
Okay, definitely. Early in the tournament, I think you can get away, or really at any stage in the tournament, I think you can definitely get away with playing aggressively with these types of hands, but there's really no purpose in it at this point. Just go ahead and fold and move on. So 10-5, King 2, 6-3, 9-7, Ace 8. Ace 8 under the gun, I think is an easy fold that perhaps some people don't make every time. I mean, how do you feel about it, Rob?
Yeah, I'd say anything less than really ace jack suited, I would fold into the gun.
Okay, definitely. So yeah, whenever you're in first position, particularly in a tough tournament, you should be folding a lot of hands. I mean, I think you could even justify folding stuff like small pairs here, because you're going to be out of position throughout the hand. It's going to make it tough to get paid off if you get a set. And stuff like Ace Jack, I would probably fold to at a very tough table. So don't be scared to fold hands early in the tournament. Jonas asks, do I ever limp under the gun? I will in soft fielded tournaments, but this is certainly not a soft field. Like I said, this tournament is a multi-entry tournament, so what people do is you could buy in up to 6 times. I believe I bought in 4 times in this. And what that ends up what that makes happen is the tournament's gonna be very regular heavy. There are gonna be very few complete weak players in this tournament. And because of that, you don't need to be getting 2 out of line in general, because they're not going to let you get 2 out of line. They're going to punish you whenever you get out of line, and because of that, you should generally play about an unexploitable game as you can. And that's going to generally mean playing just a tighter, more aggressive game. Later in the tournament, there's a question, or should we be raising ace-8 under the gun as a bluff? I think if you've been really tight, we certainly can, but I obviously have not been tight at all. So, yeah, I would not be looking to raise ace-8 very often from any position. All right, so we have pocket kings here. What do you guys like with this? What do you like with this, Rob? Fatal error made it 90 pre-flop.
Yeah, can you move that display up? Thank you. Couldn't see the raise. So it's just him and us, just fatal error and us.
Yeah, just
right?
fatal error and us. Everybody folds around to us.
I would call.
And why are you calling?
Well, I think if you raise, the guy might fold, and you've got him probably crushed. And even though he's got position, you've got a great hand. I'd want to keep him around.
Yeah, I think that certainly has some merit. I think right here that we're so deep stacked that we want to start getting money in the pot. And
okay.
I guess the problem with calling is that you have to try to figure out how you're going to get a lot of money in post flop. And if I check raise him on the flop, I'm going to end up being out of position with a hand that's going to be an overpair. So if he continues, I can't really be happy on very many turns. Like say the board comes 9-7-3. If I check, he bets, and I check raise. At that point, we're sort of overplaying our hand to some extent. And that's not what you really want to do out of position. So then you may ask, well, isn't 3-betting at pre-flop overplaying it, because we're then going to be piling more money in? It is to some extent, but not really, because we could be bluffing here. Fatal error is generally known to be a tighter player. I'm actually shocked his stats were this loose over this small sample. But I'm really not bluffing here very often, and I think that's okay. I think it's okay to only have strong hands in this situation, because we're out of position. So I'm probably going to 3-bet here, but I'm not really thrilled about it. A lot of people in the chat box are saying I should 3-bet to about 2.5 times his raise, and I'm not really a fan of that, because out of position, you want to cut down on your opponent's implied odds. The last thing you want is to 3-bet small and give him really excellent odds to call, because then what's going to happen is he's going to end up flopping well some percentage of the time, and then you're going to have a tough time continuing. Here, if we make it a little bit larger, we're cutting down on his immediate odds and his implied odds, and that's definitely what you want to do when you have a big hand. And in general, whenever you're very deep stacked, you want to get money in the pot. And by making it small, we're not really getting money in the pot. If we were more shallow stacked, like say everyone here had 1,000 chips, I would definitely 3-bet small to something like 220 or 230. But so deep stacked, you definitely have to re-raise. And this is something I think a lot of beginning players are not really, or even advanced players are not thinking about. They think of just standard 3-bet sizing, and there's not really a standard in poker. There's standard based on each stack size, but there's not a standard 3-bet size you can always make in every situation. So I'm going to be making it larger here most of the time. So I do 3-bet, and he calls. So what do you guys think about his calling range? Rob, what do you think about the calling range?
You're asking me, or I'm I don't think we learned anything there. I think it'd be the hang on a second. Sorry. I think it's sort of what I was just laying out earlier, that he could be sitting there thinking, great, I got position on this guy and a good hand. I got him, and he's raised the bet and got more money in the middle. I'm perfectly happy to just call.
Yeah, I think he's going to be. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I'm just gonna say it could be a whole wide range of things, everything from aces, where he's sitting there going, Yahoo, this guy's gonna dance with me, to all kinds of draws and stuff.
I think whenever we three bet him, he's going to probably continue with a lot of his suited connector type hands, all of his pairs. I actually think he'd
Hmm.
probably four bet with aces, kings, and queens. He's the type of guy that just piles the money in with these. I think ace king would also four bet. So I think
Okay.
whenever he calls, I think we're gonna be looking at a range sort of like this. I don't think he's gonna call too often with ace queen offsuit and ace jack offsuit. I guess he may call with ace queen offsuit. Ace jack offsuit, he's probably gonna fold. Actually, he may call with these. So I think we're gonna be looking at a range of something like this, maybe down to this. Some people in the chat are saying that they're folding hands like small pairs here. And this is very similar to what we were talking about earlier when we had the pocket threes. If we're sitting here with pocket twos in fatal error situation, he should call every time because he's putting in 200 chips to try to win 600 immediately. And then also, he's getting very good implied odds. So he should definitely call here with all of his pairs. All right, ace queen 10. What do you like here, Rob?
Well, that hits our perceived range pretty hard, I think, in his eyes. It also hits his range pretty hard in our eyes. Um, but he definitely could have, like you just pointed out, ace king or queen jack or king queen or some of those hands. And I can't see what the flop is anymore. But, so I like a C bet.
All right, so one thing you mentioned is that you think it hits his range very hard, and I'm not really sure that's true because if we look at this, well, I had the range up. Let's see. Um,
Part of his range, anyway.
the range that we had for him was ace queen, ace jack, and all the pairs besides the big pairs, and
And
then a bunch
almost
of suited
suited
connectors. So if we look at a range like this on this board, we'll see that he really doesn't hit it that hard. I mean, all the small pairs are no good, right? So let's say this is 9.5% of hands. If we figure out which, or 9% of hands, if we look at the ones that are actually ahead of us at this point, this one's not, this one's not. None of these are. So only about a third of that range is going to be ahead of us. This one's not ahead of us either. And this one's not either. So, oh wait, ace jack is. Sorry, because there's ace on board. So really, only about a third of that range is going to be ahead of us, right?
Okay.
So even though this
less
looks
so.
pretty scary, it's probably not that bad for us. So the question is, should we bet or should we check? And if we bet, what's going to happen is the guy's going to continue with some of the hands that are all the hands that have us beat, and then some of the hands that don't, like Jack 10, Queen Jack. He's probably going to continue with those. Well, he definitely is going to continue with those. So we can get some value here. And I think one of the other added benefits is that we bet him off of stuff like pocket twos. And you may think, why do we want the guy to fold twos here? And the answer is he's only going to put in more money if he makes a set. So if we check, we're giving him sort of a free roll to peel those cards. And that's not really what we want to do. If we check and he bets, we sort of open up a scary range that, or a scary thing that such that if we check and he bets the flop and we call, on the turn if we check and he bets again and we call, we're not really happy at that point anymore. So I think right here we can bet and get, I'm not going to say accurate information, but we can get value out of some worse hands and hopefully figure out where we stand in the hand accurately. Whereas if we check, I think we may open up the door for us to get bluffed. So, what do I, Brian asks, what do I do if I bet and he raises? Well, I will fold. Simple as that. I think whenever people raise on this flop, I don't think Fatal Error is going to be raising hands like Ace Jack and Ace King and Ace. I mean, he'll raise Ace Queen here for value, but I don't think he's going to be raising stuff like Queen Jack here because that hand has some value, and he wants to keep me in at this point. He wants to keep me in, and if he raises, I'm only going to continue with most better hands. So we bet here, and he folds. It's not much to that one. Actually, what I'm going to do, Rob, I'm going to call on someone else for a little while. That's cool with you. Do you have any other questions before I let you off the phone?
Um, You mean related to these specific hands or
No,
just in
related to
general?
anything in general.
Okay, I do have one question I was thinking about
Okay.
yesterday. When when you're playing cash versus a tournament, and I'm speaking here of the early part of the tournament when you're deep stacked and essentially playing cash style. Um, is there any difference in how you approach those two games?
Yes, just to some extent, not a ton, but a little bit. Basically, I'm going to be giving up on some value bets in tournaments, whereas in cash games, I'm pretty much going to be betting hands like top pair for value the whole way. Like, let's say I raise with king queen and it comes king 7-2. Like I raise from middle position and the big
Mm-hmm.
blind calls, it comes king 7-2. In a tournament, I'm going to be looking to check behind on one street, whereas in a cash game, I'm probably going to go bets. And then if I get check raised at any point, I'm going to be folding. So in a tournament, I'm going to say I bet the flop and the guy calls. I'm probably going to check behind the turn. And then on the river if he bets, I'm going to call. And on the river if he checks, I'm going to bet. Whereas in a cash game, I'm going to go for three full streets of value. Because if you put in three full bets, your hand is not really in amazing shape versus the calling range. But you're still going to be ahead. And because of that, if you look at the other line of betting one street, checking one street, then betting the other street, your hand's going to be in amazing shape versus his range. So basically, you are going to win that hand a ton of the time. Whereas if you go bet, you may end up losing this hand because you're forcing his range to be better. So when you go
Mm-hmm.
bet, maybe you win like 55 or 58% of the time. And if you go the other line, you probably win something like 80 or 90% of the time. And you keep variance very low. And in tournaments, you want to keep variance low. So I guess what that boils down to is you need to take lines in tournaments to get full value, and in cash games in cash games you need to take lines to get full value, and in tournaments you need to take lines to protect your stack because you only have one buy-in. If you lose in the cash game, like say the guy happens to have ace king on that hand, and you lose, and you end up losing 50 big blinds or 100 big blinds, it's not the end of the world because you can rebuy. But in a tournament, you can't
Right.
rebuy, and now you're stuck with half your starting stack. Whereas if you played it a little bit slower, you would have only lost like 20 or 30 big blinds. So in tournaments in general, you need to look for ways to conserve your stack. And also in tournaments, you usually have a little bit more fold equity when you apply pressure. Whereas in cash games, guys will tend to call it off. They're not too concerned with going broke. I mean, like we said, because they can reload also. So in tournaments, I'm going to be looking to push my draws a little bit harder sometimes against the right players because they really don't want to go broke. Whereas in cash games, that may not be such the greatest play because some guys may not go broke.
Okay. Great.
You have any
Thanks.
other questions?
No. Carry on with the next
All
contestant.
right, excellent. Thanks for being here. All right, I'm going to pause the video really fast. I'll make the screen larger, and I'll be back in something like 2 minutes. And if you want to be the next person to participate, let me know. What I'm going to do is I'm only going to call on you if you type in that you want to participate, because right now it seems like we have a lot of people here, and I definitely want to give priority to people who want to be in here and want to be participating. So, yeah, if you want to be next, type it in. Let me know. I'll be right back in about 2 minutes.